Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Alright, so feedback is important. Feel free to reach out. And I really appreciate the listeners out there who have been sending me feedback. Thank you so much. It's very valuable. And I really appreciate all of your thoughts, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you. Alright, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, just to name a few. Alright, so this episode is the continuation, as I was saying, about the aspects of fan theories. So this time, now, John Hughes was a very, very prolific in the aspects of talking about subject matters is for the essence of coming of age. So particularly with his niche, he focused in on the teenage aspects of the 1980s and the disposition of youth culture. But he did also, within that sector, he focused on families in itself. So now what I'm going to do is go in and chime in on fan theories about popular movies that he has created. For instance, the Breakfast Club is the main nucleus of what I'm going to focus in on. I'm going to draw out and talk about other aspects of his films and how those characters relate to one another. Here we go. So my thoughts before I get into the aspects of fan theories about John Hughes films and all of that. All right, so it was really interesting, and it's always good to get more insight about these things. When you see it, for the most part, me growing up personally. Me growing up, I grew up in the early 2000s. I was preteen, teen, all of that in the early 2000s. So that was a quite stark difference from the original content in which these movies were created. But the preference is still the same. They all are relatable themes to any sort of generation. And I think that was the real deep intentional hook that John Hughes had when he created his work. Most of the time, whether intentional or unintentional, his themes really resonated with people because there was not some preconceived notion that it was just only relatable to one sort of type of person. Even though some people like to have the criticisms, that goes without saying, of course, anything that is a public display or anything that is a public discourse, of course, criticism is going to come along the way with it. But, this whole aspects of which is something that needs to be, which wishful thinking, but it's something that needs to be exceeded outward and shouldn't be, a focal point of thought. And then, it's weird when you get into that mindset of that us versus them sort of mentality. It ruins the aspects of subject matter that can be further looked into. That's not always the case. And so what I mean by this is that, some critics say that, well, John Hughes was mainly focusing in on the aspects of white America and the aspects of teenage middle class, really it's upper class when you get into the aspects of the suburbs, or the towns in which most of these characters lived in, well on upper class, even though it was supposed to be depicting the middle class. But also that is I think, a testament to the aspects of the economic culture and commentary of what was going on in the 80s, right? Because, 80s was all, on the surface level, from my point of view, outsider looking in here. On the surface level, it seems as if the 80s was all about exceeding the power of going up the ladder. And what that means is that economic growth with people wanting to pursue higher and higher and higher in their careers. And then that in itself gives people more aspiration to achieve and to want more things. And then you get into the aspects of people having more say and buying power in which they consume. And so you get these quote unquote it's the yuppies where, they're highly tunnel vision. I wouldn't say tunnel vision, but that's how it can be perceived with the aspects of, focusing in on, I want to go to college for the pursuit of wealth. I want to build wealth. I want to have something when I come out of college. There's an exceeded economic goal behind that. And these things were really, showcased in the aspects of how parents, the disposition that parents had with their children in these specific types of movies. Where there's Breakfast Club, which I would center most of my thoughts around, or Pretty in Pink, or Ferris Bueller's Days Off, even extended out into the aspects of Home Alone, and then going back to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Now, going back to what I said about the criticism. Now, you see, I would say that is something that for someone to have a criticism about that, that's pretty narrow-minded, in itself, And, again, everybody has their own opinion, but I don't know, that's something that's not really, really genuine about that. Because in itself, you cannot take away what somebody else's own personal experience is about something. John Hughes, his background, he grew up in the Midwest. That's what he knew. That's what he knows. And then to say that where somebody's own personal experience is rudimentarily detrimental to someone else, that's not all that good. When in itself, when he goes out and pursues his career, of course he's going to run around a multitude of different diversity and different people. Yeah, that goes without saying. But at the heart of the matter, what John Hughes is trying to talk about is the aspects of coming to terms with things when you're young. And he's saying that from his point of view, from his disposition. But at the essence, which was very clever, which with the nuance of being an adult, he was able to, whether that is his, it's one of those things is if his creation as a director, versus the actors that were chosen to depict these particular characters here, but also with the aspects of the directors, getting the final insight of how things lay out. With his adult perspective of a nuance of developing other extended characters and other extended thoughts about the main characters, that in itself is why it is relatable, I think, to anyone. Anybody can have that sort of experience of what it's like to be new, or that sort of experience of what it's like to be really smart and be labeled as something that you're not, or you be a part of the popular crowd and that's your only identity, but you don't know how to really escape from that, even though you kind of want to. You don't really know. And all this aspects of being strange and nobody really understanding you, or the aspects of being poor and trying to come across as if you belong in somewhere where people don't want you around. I mean, a lot of people can relate to that. And so with this said, that is going to cultivate a lot of fan theories about things that seem like they're there, but there's a little more elements that's missing that, again, is really can be very eloquent with the aspects of people making these commentaries or making these, thoughts, foreseen thoughts about what they see. Okay, so with all of this said, I'm going to jump into the aspects and talk about fan theories about The Breakfast Club and other aspects of John Hughes films. Here we go. All right, of course, sources will be provided for you. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Looking. All right, so I'm going to start out with the fan universe of the John Hughes films, particularly centered around Sherman, Illinois. All right, so fan theory suggests that many of John Hughes' films exist within a shared fictional universe, often referred as Shermanverse, centered on the town of Sherman, Illinois. So according to himself, characters from films like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles inhabit this interconnected world with specific connections such as Dale Griffin, which was John Candy's character that was in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Now, it's quite interesting because I could say it's a stretch, but hear me out on this. So, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles also centers around the aspects of families and belonging and the disillusion of what happens when those things are no longer in existence. In the case of Dale Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and John Candy's character. So the fact that it says in this fan theory that he also lives 2 doors down from John Bender speaks volumes. So it's saying that in the aspects of the connection of how both of them are similarly, it's not, well, it's different, but it's the aspects of belonging is similar. Like there's not that holistic connection with family and something to have a meaningful purpose behind. So unfortunately, in John Bender's case, the aspects of an abusive and dysfunctional family is very present. And then in the alternative of that is the Griffith with him going on and coming to terms with the aspects of being a widower, and how to cope and have the sense of that everything is okay, but it really isn't. All right, so, and Ferris Bueller, knowing Samantha Baker from 16 Candles, while Hughes confirms the existence of this universe and confirmed this existence in the universe of this universe, that is, in 1999 in a premiere article, the crossover possibilities were never realized in the film. So the Shermanverse is believed to include films such as 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and Weird Science. With the latter specifically set in Sherman, as Lisa is seen teaching at Sherman High at the end. It is spectacular. It's speculated that in Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, and also in the Home Alone films, many also are a part of the Shermanverse. So that makes a whole lot of sense because John Hughes is trying to depict the aspects of seemingly a middle class family, but they're more affluent than that. But in the aspects of what's going on and trying to and being economically sound, there's more to the family than what it seems. And piecing all that together, and for the whole family to come together towards the end, or however that works out. All right, so as you know, Hughes was involved in these projects, though it is not definitely confirmed. The film She's Having a Baby is confirmed not to be a part of the Shermanverse, as Neil Page's wife is seen watching it on television in planes, trains, and automobiles. Neil Page's wife, which was, Steve Martin's character. Alright, so a popular fan theory points to a potential Easter egg in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where a banner reading, Go Sherman, appears in a hallway suggesting the characters attended the same school as those in the Breakfast Club. So a separate, more speculative theory proposes that there is a shared universe linking the Hughes films to other blockbuster films such as Ghostbusters. Well, one blockbuster film, Ghostbusters, the television series Frasier, Cheers, and based on post-credit scenes and She's Having a Baby, featuring actors from various 1980 films. Though it is not supported by official sources and is considered a fan interpretation. Alright, so here we go. Breakfast Club. Alright, so Breakfast Club, before I get into the aspects of the fan theories, is very, 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 very simple in the aspects of seeing it from this point of view here. Now, all of us have been at that point in our lives where we, especially, which is very prevalent in the aspects of John Hughes films, of trying to cope with adolescent stages in life, like fitting in, nothing's ever good enough, I don't look quite right, and all these things. Now, what if there's more to it, to the layer, than what is seen in the Breakfast Club? Now, most people would say, if there was a top 5 or top 10 list or what have you, or top 100, list of movies that shape the aspects of being quite honest in the depictions of adolescence and angst and all of these things. It's an anonymous that people would say pinpoint towards the Breakfast Club. And it's quite understandable because, which was really good about John Hughes, the late John Hughes here, he was able to not have a weird sort of disposition about the way that being young, being teenage is. He recounted the aspects of that from his point of view when he was teenage, and then he relied, from what I understand, he relied heavily on the aspects of the interpretations of the young actors and what they thought, and then also cultivating that into how his envision of how he think the thought, they flow, and the scenes of these characters should work. And that's why these things resonate quite clearly in the aspects of his films, because you can tell there's a genuine respect towards the aspects of trying to, depict what it is as far as that genre. All right, with that said, I'm going to get into the fan theories. So several fan theories about the Breakfast Club explore the film's events as a product of imagination, trauma, or unrelatable narration. Now, there's two folds of interpretations about this. Some fan theories say that Anthony Michael Hall's character, that he has a dissociative disorder, and really all of these characters are himself, and they're just manifestations of him trying to come to terms with the dysfunction and the abuse in his own home, and then the abuse towards him and himself and his disposition with his mother and all of those things. And so that's quite interesting. But there's another theory that says that also on the same level, it says that John Bender, which is I see his name, but I can't recall the actor's name right now. But that he is, because of his trauma, these are all imaginary. And there's also other layers to that, too. All right, here we go. So it says, one prominent theory suggests that the entire film is a daydream according to John Bender's mind, so reflecting his feelings of entrapment and dysfunction, particularly highlighting by the scenes where Mr. Vernon sentences him to more detention, symbolizing his perceived inescapable fate. So another theory posits that the story unfolds entirely within Allison's imagination, which was I don't know why it's escaping me her actual name, but Ali Sheedy and her depiction of, the goth weird chick. All right, so Allison's imagination, as she is isolated in friendliness, invents the other event. She is inventing, the other characters and their interactions as a coping mechanism for her loneliness. So, related interpretation from Reddit post argues that the film is the wishful thinking of Brian, which is Anthony Michael Hall character. So, Brian the Brain, who is feeling friendliness, he has no friends. He's isolated. He's creating a narrative where the different social cliques connect and accept him, projecting his own desires into the other characters. So other theories delve into darker interpretations of the characters' lives. One theory proposes that Claire is secretly being abused by her father, and the relationship with Bender is partly as a protective measure, so a connection formed for safety rather than a romance, which is, I can see that because the way her disposition is, with her father when she's sitting there and she's talking to him, and then when she comes back towards the end of the movie and how he looks and how he sees his disposition with, hi baby, okay, he sees his daughter and the disposition that she is with Bender. There's something more to it than what is presented. But also another theory going within the aspects of Anthony Michael Hall's character. So hear me out on this. So if you notice, or you want to go back and watch this film, Brian is the center focus most of the time in this movie. Hold on, baby. Shh. Sorry about that. So if you notice that it always reverts back to Brian, no matter what happens in the scenarios, the situation of the other characters, it always reverts back to him. Even the letter is always reverted back for Brian to write everything, and what they're thinking, their interpretations about detention, which is quite odd. So that alludes to another layer that maybe these characters are not real and they're all a figment of his dissociative imagination here. All right, so with Bender showing protective behavior towards her and a shared history evident, so some fan theories focus on characters' dynamics and hidden connections. One suggests that Bender and Allison knew each other before the detention, with Bender showing protective behavior towards her and a shared history evidence in their interactions, such as their dance scene and her reaction when he mentions meeting her on Monday. Conversely, another theory presents a more cynical view, suggesting that the characters' lives are not changed by the day, and they do not socialize with each other on Monday, and implying the experience was fleeting and the social divisions remain intact. All right, so this reaches the end, and of course I would like to know what you all think, and I appreciate those who give me comments. It means everything, and I really appreciate it. And you others out there, you have thoughts, you have questions, concerns, feel free to contact me in the ways you see fit. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.